We're often told just how heavily regulated Scotch whisky is. We're told that there are only two varieties. Let's see what those two varieties, what kind of flexibility that can give a whisky maker, and just what can be done with them. Hello, whisky folk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Thursday night vPub. Fantastic to see so many of you in. But of course, I'm starting to realize that, everybody's kind of still in this situation, this crazy situation where they're stuck at home and they're looking for things to do, and they've probably binged themselves to death on Netflix now, right? I'm very, very grateful that you're able to pour yourself a wee dram and come and hang out with me on Thursdays. And recently I've been putting out some content, extended opening hours on a Sunday night as well. But those are kind of just laid back, more relaxed little sessions that I can hang out with the chat. On a Thursday night like tonight, what we're trying to do is put together something that is a bit of an interesting topic, something to understand a wee bit better, and sometimes concepts to get our head round a wee bit. The discussion that I'm bringing to you tonight is one that's I think is super interesting, and that idea that, you've probably heard me over the months complaining about how confusing the Scotch landscape can be sometimes with all the cask finishes and all the age statements, all the different brands coming from all the same companies. But when you actually strip it back and you go and you look at it from the production end, and you consider that in Scotch, we only make two whiskies. We make malt whiskey and we make grain whiskey. And everything that we enjoy, whether it's a blend or a blended malt, a blended grain, whatever it may be, all come from those two basic products. And they are heavily, heavily regulated. We all know just how heavily Scotch whisky is regulated in terms of how that malt whisky and that grain whisky is made. So sometimes you would imagine that it's a bit claustrophobic or a bit restrictive for a whisky maker. Well, that depends, and that's the topic that I'm going to discuss and share with you tonight. But first I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to welcome some of the whisky folk, the marvellous whisky folk who hang out here in the lounge every Sunday and Thursday, and the fantastic dedicated barflies as well. Let's see who's in tonight already. Somebody's bought me a dram. Lee Kerwin, you star. Hi Roy, I hope you're well. I think you have competition on your hands. I hear the Pope is evangelizing that whiskey is the true holy water. I wonder, is that a current affairs comment, Lee? I wonder if that's something that's out in the news or something like that. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if the Pope does indeed enjoy a wee dram. Thank you, Lee, and thank you so much for your virtual dram, my friend. Slancha to you as well. I hope you're well too. Ebhead Rolf is in. Fantastic. Ebhead recently had a birthday as well. Many happy returns to you, Rolf. Eric Evanson is here saying, can't wait to hear about your topic. Marcus Kreitner is here. Good to see you, Marcus. I hope Christina is with you again. Reeking Haddix is here. Good to see you, my friend. Arnie Tiger. Tom R. from Chicago. Only two Scotch whiskies, the ones I like and the ones I don't like. I was fully expecting that a few people would chime in and say something along those lines, Tom. And I tend to find that there are ones that I like and ones that I haven't learned how to like yet. That's the way I look at it. But yeah, sure, there are some out there that we like a wee bit less, Tom. Good to have you in, my friend. Good to welcome you here. Rico is here. Falsgraf is here. Neil Cochran, Andy C., Bill Balistreri. I need to practice pronouncing your surname, Bill, but it's wonderful to have you, my friend. Whiskey Radar is here. Roland, good to have you. Service Alafis, that's Andreas from Norway. Desi, Zach Andrews from Texas. You star, good to see you. Billy Saunders is here. Che Francis. Steve. Whiskey Brer is in. Menno's Multi-Mission. Some of the questions in the quiz tonight, if you stay till the end, some of the questions that's been used in the quiz have been contributed by our barfly Menno. Ander Garcia is here. Good to see you, Ander. Daniel Gray, Jimmy Legg, as always, fantastic to have you, Jimmy. Wonderful to see you. And Keane O'Hara is here. Steve Anderson, good to have you, my friend. Carl Van Wallingen, Whiskey Crusaders, Matt Wonderful, Matt. I've got an email from you, an invitation to join in your 1K celebrations. I'm going to look at the time slots and hopefully I might be able to support there. It would be wonderful if I can. I'll try my very best. But regardless, congrats to Whiskey Crusaders on hitting 1,000 subscribers. Well done. Congratulations. I think it's a great idea that you're doing a collaborative form to celebrate it as well. Rule is here, Orange Rule is in. Great to see you, my friend. Greg's Whiskey Guide from France, Luna Aaron, Colin Brick, Roy Flicks. Superb, Colin. Skogsmard. When are we getting another recycled review? It's been a while now. I can confirm that there are indeed 15 empty bottles just waiting to be shot. It just needs me to find a wee pocket of time to get it shot. I would love to be able to bring you a recycled review in April. Let's shoot for that, Skogsmard. Thank you for your patience. Kresimir is here. Good to see you, Kresimir. Laddie Rombout is here. Fantastic. Vlad 100. Great to see so many of you. And the Whiskey Bowman, Chris, not seeing you in a wee while. I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're keeping safe, Chris. And it's good to welcome you in. He's saying, evening, folks. Evening, Roy. Hope everyone is well. I think most of us are doing very well. And Matt from Whiskey Crusaders is saying, good to see you, Roy. This is one advantage of working at home during the virus, getting to join. Thanks, Roy. The more time goes on, I'm starting to give myself a bit of a break. At the start, I was feeling guilty about the silver linings. See the family being together and having just kind of much more time to do things that you didn't have time to do before when you were working and busy juggling all the time. There are silver linings to this. I know it's a horrible time. People are suffering. Economically, the long-term effects are going to be very, very difficult. And I know that in the vPub, we tend not to talk about it. We try not to talk about the C word. But I do find myself, Matt, you're absolutely spot on, that there are silver linings. And I think what you've got to be able to do is embrace those and enjoy those and at least recognize that they are there. It's great to have you and Matt as well. And I'm glad that you're managing to find some positives in this pretty scary mess. Tim is here, Tonner Pass Whiskey, saying, sweet, another nice day out at the recycle bin. Well, I was hoping that maybe we'd get a bright sunny day for a change to do a recycle review in the sun. But I'm not going to be fussy. As long as the wind's calm enough and I can get some quiet time, I would probably need to do it when my wife's here because the kids are all home from school. They're homeschooling right now, so we would have to have somebody to look after the kids. As much as they want to appear in a video, I don't think it's appropriate for my kids to appear in a whiskey-related video. What do you think? Eric Evanson is saying, I have a green spot in my glass. Can't wait to see your first pour. I'd hope you get to dig into the sample box since you forgot last time. So digging into the sample box, that's the box that's kind of that kind of Union flag decorated box down there. I realise that's a bit of a political, it isn't a political statement, it's just incidental that that's the box I'm using for samples. I did forget on Sunday night to dip into the sample box. I actually I'm sipping and comparing two blends here as we get set up tonight, which are in line with tonight's topic. That's actually what I have in the glass, two blends. So I wonder what you have, Eric. I hope it's something tasty. Skogsmart is saying, why is it that line arms seem to get longer? Oops. And longer all the time. Most recently, Ardnahoe touted the longest ones in Scotland when they opened. Is there a benefit to long line arms? I guess it's all to do with a copper contact. I think that the line arms at Ardnahoe were designed to be long, designed to be as long as they are. But there's also that thing that the stills are going to be away out there at the window looking over the lovely vista. And the condensers, the worm tubs, are actually outside, kind of facing the front of the building or located in the front of the building. So the line arms, I guess, have to be that long too. I don't know. There's a lot of distilleries out there that prefer a shorter line arm. There's a lot of them that have them ascending. Some of them have them horizontal. Some of them have kinks in them. Some of them have descending. It's all to do with what they hope to achieve in the end product and the end spirit. The Whiskey Influencer, good to see you, my friend, is saying not until they are 18. Absolutely. That's in the UK and Europe. Elsewhere in the world, it's even older, I guess, in New York. I remember from my time in New York, I had to carry a passport with me to prove that I was over 21. It's gone back a few years, of course. That looks like Gregor's Layman. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Gregor's Layman. Yes, I think so. I have done a blind tasting for friends based on your formula. Worked very well. As a thank you, they gifted me a 2020 Long Row Red 13. Wow. Well, I know that you earned it, but it's a fantastic gift to get. Fabulous to hear. There's a lot of kind of the blind tasting going on just now. Lots of people sharing. And it's not just kind of on YouTube content that's been made. It's people getting together in whatever platform they like. And like Gregor McQuee has been doing it extensively, but I've seen more and more of that happening. People sharing what they're doing on social media, Instagram and things, and getting together, even though they're very, very remote, and doing these kind of remote blind challenges. I think they're great fun. I'm continually fascinated. I never get tired of doing blind challenges, and I would like to continue to bring more to this channel and beyond. I owe the Mash and Drum his blind challenge set. I need to go and get Jason's set sorted out for him and get it shipped off to him. I haven't done that yet. I am up to date with my, if you've bought any merchandise from me, any coins, any t-shirts, glasses or whatever, I'm up to date with shipping now. The local depot has opened with very, very narrow windows where they used to be open all day. It's just narrow windows in the morning now, but I have caught up again, and tomorrow and over the weekend I'll catch up with all the samples now that I owe everybody, people that have won samples on the channel and things over the last few weeks, and I'll catch up with that as well. It's good to have my local depot open, even if it is for just a few hours in the morning. I tried to go a couple of weeks back. I had the kids with me in the car, and it was just so busy there. It was when all of this kicked off. I just didn't want to get involved, so I stayed away for a while. And eventually they closed things down for a while. So yeah, it's been tough to work out how to get packages shipped efficiently recently, but I'm getting back on top of it again. So if you're waiting on things from me, thank you for your patience. It's on its way. Eric is saying, Aquaviti, I see my favourite 2 bottles over your left shoulder by the lamp. So rich and complex, yet cheap. Well, I have displayed those there for a very good reason. I may need to reach for them because they're directly connected with the guy who's going to help us with our topic tonight. I like them too, Eric. Jamie Brown is saying, was doing a live Foursquare tasting with my dad earlier. Lovely stuff. Do you enjoy any rums? I do, but I don't buy rums. The rums that I've enjoyed so far, and it's that kind of thing where there are so many different styles of Scotch whisky, so many different styles of whisky generally, that moving into different spirits is even more of a challenge for me. But when people send me rums, I do enjoy them. I've even had a few Foursquare rums, and I do enjoy them very much, Jamie. Multi-Mission is saying, you might be in need of a PA at this point. Yeah, building a team. Yes, that would be a focus. Absolutely. It's difficult to keep up sometimes, but I do my best. So many of you in tonight. It's wonderful to welcome you all here for what is, for me, a very curious topic. The idea that I've just looked over. Did I spot? I did. I spotted Jesse in from Stillet. Yes, we need to get Aquaviti into rum. I just did Jesse just this week released a podcast where he invited me on, and he recorded a podcast, and we talked about whiskey community and taking collaboration and community and things like that into our content and our output, and how perhaps people that are getting into craft production, like Jesse, literally he's distilling at home. He's down in New Zealand. He can legally do that. So we had a nice discussion about that. So if you head over to Jesse's website, and you'll be able to find that, I guess, from his YouTube channel. Jesse, you're welcome to share your link for your website in here in the chat tonight. Hopefully one of my admins will clear that, and you can listen to that podcast. But it's wonderful to welcome Jesse in, because I know he's 12 hours ahead of us. So I know it's potentially very early in the morning where you are, Jesse. Nice to see you. Ben Marnock is here. Good to see you, Ronnie, saying, I've just got a sample set for a Lady of the Glen virtual tasting 6 days after it took place. Now, I can't remember which is which, so it's going to be a bit like a blind tasting. Is that down to the shipping and all the craziness that's going on just now, perhaps? Good to have you in, Ronnie. And Multi-Mission, Menno is saying, Roy's Rums Musings, bring out the Panama hats. Yeah. I like whiskey too much. But I don't mind tasting a wee rum from time to time. Jimmy Legg is saying aquavitae and still it. Roy was crying again. There were no tears, Jimmy. There were no tears. Don't worry about it. There you go. Steve A has cleared that link for Jesse's channel. Thank you so much, Steve. And you should be able to pick up links to Jesse's website and his podcast from there. Great to see you all. So the topic tonight for me is one where it's sometimes a surprise. The first ever video that went out in my channel, I don't encourage anybody to go back and watch it. It's difficult to watch. But the first ever video went out, I kind of felt the need to talk about that concept, that in Scotland, we only make two styles of whiskey, malt and grain. And from there, from those two whiskies, we have our 5 predefined categories. And those are, of course, single malt. So it's pot still distillation from a single distillery, and single grain. So that would typically be through a continuous still from a single distillery. Then you would have any 2 types of those would make blended malt and blended grain in it. So it's got 4 categories. And if you blend any 2 of those components together, you've got blended Scotch. And blended Scotch is obviously by far, in terms of volume, the biggest category that we have, followed by single malt. And then we've seen the proliferation more recently of single grains have been embraced, even blended grains and blended malts. All 5 categories you can buy products from nowadays. But there's potentially more than that available to us. Not everybody is able to make any more than those 5, but some are. And when you start to talk about it, and when you start to explore what's actually possible, it's difficult to get your head around a little bit. And I thought, if I'm going to cover this topic of all the Scotch whiskies that we all know coming from just these 2 base products, who can I reach out to? And I chose to reach out to a barfly, believe it or not. I chose to reach out to a master blender. And the master blender that I reached out to is Michael Henry. And for the last 13 or so years, he's been up at Loch Lomond. And most recently, he's been making some, I have to be honest, he's been making some fantastic. Jesse, welcome to Aquavitae Barflies, my friend. It's good to have you supporting. He's been making some amazing, I've missed a super chat in, just Russell Whiskey. My friend Russell is just saying Slantia. I'll raise a glass and say Slantia straight back, Russell. Thank you so much for your dram. So as Eric pointed out over my left shoulder, I've got a couple of Loch Lommonds there. That's the 12 and the 18-year-old. Very old school style. Very attention-grabbing whiskies. It's not an easy sit back and relax type whiskey. Every sip is kind of asking for your attention, a little bit like a Campbelltown, a little bit like a old school traditional Highlander, maybe along the lines of Ben Nevis. It kind of reminds me of that style of whiskey. And over my right shoulder, there's a couple of Glen Scotias as well, which is under Michael Henry's responsibility as well. So I just like everybody to take stock for a second that we've been able to reach out to Zach Andrews, who bought me a dram, saying, wishing Ebhead a happy birthday. Yeah, that's a great idea, Zach. Many happy returns to Rolf. Slantia, and thank you for the dram, Zach. We have to just take stock of the fact for a second that not only have we got people in the community that are in the roles of creating whiskey, but they're willing to step in and support and enjoy the content and enjoy contributing towards the content as well. So we've got a master blender joining us tonight to help us navigate Scotch whisky categories and what can be done with that. And I think that that's a marvelous position to be in. So let me reach out to my friend Michael and welcome him in to introduce himself to you all. Michael, how are you?
Hi, Roy. Good here.
Now I'm going to try and have a stab at giving you a bit of an introduction here. We've met before. I've enjoyed meeting you at a couple of festivals. I think you welcomed me at Loch Lomond last year. I had a fantastic time at Loch Lomond, and it was kind of a mind-blowing event to go around that distillery and see it all with you. The hospitality you showed me there was fantastic. Thank you so much. But if I remember, you're a Northern Irishman, originally involved in brewing, got involved in, and I think you did a degree at Heriot Watt, in brewing and distilling, and joined Loch Lomond in 2007, and you've been there ever since. And currently, I believe your title at Loch Lomond would be Master Blender.
Blender, yeah. So I cover the 3 distilleries. So I cover Loch Lomond, Glen Scotia, the 2 active, and also cover Little Mill.
Little Mill.
Distillery.
So you have responsibility over creating whiskies from the 2 active distilleries, and also creating whiskey from, I guess, the remaining stocks that's left of Little Mill.
Yeah. So I look after all bottled expressions for the 3 distilleries now.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask people to ask questions generally tonight, and I'll do my very, very best to pick from the chat so that we can. But I've got a question for you straight away as soon as you mention that. Is there much Little Mill left?
That's probably one thing I'm not allowed to answer. Saying one advantage we have over independents is that when we do a release, I have a range of casks to play with.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one thing that I think there's still a number of independent bottlings of Little Mill.
Yes.
One thing kind of sets us apart as the official bottler. We're able to use sort of several casks in any bottling we do. So it just means we have kind of more flexibility and can be more creative with what we're doing with Little Mill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have to say that often you can pick up, it may be a single cask from an independent bottler, but in the case of Little Mill, you can still pick up. I mean, it's expensive, of course, but for a closed distillery that closed way back in the early 90s, it's still relatively affordable compared to most. And it is a real piece of history there. But just talking about Little Mill, you're creating something from a product that you've inherited, let's say, for the want of to kind of summarize it as neatly as I can. But Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond, you've got the ability to also shape the product at the front end in terms of distilling what you want to produce at some point down the line. So it's a very, very different role. And I think that obviously that's where we're going to focus on tonight. And especially I'm completely fascinated by the setup that you have at Loch Lomond. If we imagine that Glen Scotia is maybe much more of a kind of traditional style double distillation pot still single malt distillery, but at Loch Lomond, the setup that you've got, I've got an infographic that I will share with everybody tonight to just give some people some insight into the toys that you have at hand to play with. It's really quite incredible. So tell us, if you can, in the space of a minute or so, what's the role of Michael Henry as a master blender right now? What is your what are you tasked with doing? Are you focused on distillation? Are you focused on creating the whiskies, or is the gamut cover it all?
It's really creating the whiskies. So we have distillery managers, and we've Ian at Glen Scotia and Derek at Loch Lomond.
Yep.
Work with them. Can I tie in with them on the distillation? But it's largely the distillation, they look after it, and I'm there to support them with anything. My role is really what you see that's in the bottles coming out now. I kind of pull all the casks together and kind of fine tune the expressions and come up with what goes into the bottle. So that really starts with stock management, knowing what all the spirit styles are, how they behave at the different ages, and how we can pull them together, how we can combine them, what we can do, just putting them out as straight expressions, or sometimes it's a low wood influence mostly, but the odd time we will do a cask finish. So it's kind of deciding what that is and how that'll work with our distillery character. So there's there's the whiskey creation side, but then also have to look at that today. tomorrow, 2 years' time, 10 years' time.
Yes.
So, probably about 20% of it's the fun stuff, the kind of nosing, kind of blending, working out what's going with what. The other 80% is sitting with a big spreadsheet trying to predict the future.
Well, I have to say, and I say this, and it's not because I want to flatter you. Certainly, it'd be nice for you to hear some of this, honestly. But I've said it to you when I've met you in the past. But when it comes to Glen Scotia, we had a live stream recently, and I talked openly about huge improvements at Glen Scotia in terms of consistency, quality, and it's gone from a try before you buy distillery for me to one that I'd be comfortable for anybody just to go out and buy an expression from it. And I would also say that I've seen a huge, in a much similar way in terms of Loch Lomond, I feel confident of just picking up a bottle of Loch Lomond now and buying it, any of the expressions in Shmone and Schmurren, the standard Loch Lomond expressions, and we'll get into those in a little bit. But I do feel that there has been a step up in engagement and enjoyment. The presentation seems to be much better for a huge swathe of the range as well. You're putting things out of 46%, and the value is still there. If I was to summarize both distilleries, the thing that I think links them, and you can tell me whether you think that I'm off a little bit, but I think that they both do seem to recall a traditional style of whiskey to me in terms of the flavour profile. Both Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond, they've got an older, slightly more challenging, slightly more industrial, slightly agricultural almost flavour profile to them. Would you agree? Was that something that you've intended, or?
With Glen Scotia, it's intentional. Like the vPub last week about Campbelltown talked about the history that's there. So with Glen Scotia, we really don't want to kind of change anything. We just want to keep that kind of quality of spirit we have now. We'll use kind of traditional casks that are associated with kind of sherries, ports. So just keep it, try not to do too much with the spirit there.
Right.
So I guess that would be a traditional style. With Loch Lomond, it's been harder to nail down a style because of the flexibility that's there in the distillery. So that's really been about looking at kind of what we do and what kind of defines the character of what we're doing. And for me, that's really the kind of the fruit character we get from like the yeast, the fermentations, the straight neck stills, a bit of sweetness from the refill American oak that we use for the maturation, and softer peat character. When we're distilling in the straight neck stills, we take a lot of the kind of bigger phenols out, and you're left with like a soft, smoky, spicy peat. So it's how we kind of bring that together for Loch Lomond. It's really taking it back to
right. So just before we go charging down that rabbit hole, the Campbelltown vPub, I'm so glad that you picked it up. I'm so glad you caught it. So that's kind of much more easy to define. You've gone for the traditional kind of more Campbelltown style, Victorian style of whiskey, let's say. But up at Loch Lomond, you've already started to talk a little bit about straight neck stills. You've talked about some of the malt being slightly peated and things. I think there'd be a good point now to just show people Loch Lomond as a distillery is kind of mind-blowing, because I think as a whiskey enthusiast, you come in and we tend to forget about grain distilleries, let's be honest. They're not open with visitor centres and things like that. They are kind of the industrial side of the whiskey making process. So we all of our consumption tends to be in a nice little, often cottage style whiskey distillery, a malt distillery with 2 or 3, maybe 4 traditional pot stills. That's kind of how we see single malt whiskey being produced. And it just scales up from there, I guess. But when you go into Loch Lomond, and I'll try and share this infographic, Michael, and I will try and kind of just give a broad overview of the infographic, but I think it's going to generate a lot of questions. Let's try and pull this up. See if I still have it available. Here we go. So here, I mean, if we look at this, a blue-headed section here across the top, I don't think anybody can see my cursor, unfortunately. But here we have, under the traditional pot stills, we've got swan neck pot stills on the left, and we've got straight-necked pot stills. We've got unpeated, medium peated, and highly peated for both sections. We've got high strength, low strength under the straight-necked pot stills. And this is all just traditional malt whiskey production. Then we go on to a continuous still, and this kind of copper-coloured continuous still here. This is a continuous still that is designed for distilling only malted barley. And then obviously continuous grain stills, that's the silver still on the right-hand side. And if I zoom in here, I can zoom in, I guess, on any of the sections that anybody kind of wants to focus on. But here we can see on the left-hand side, we've got the top three are single malt. Then we have something called a single grain, which we'll get to in a minute. And then underneath, we have three house blend styles. And there's a little kind of marker here as to what kind of malt, what kind of spirit is drawn in to make that product. So right away, we've taken these two styles of Scotch whiskey, malt and grain, and immediately it's fragmented now into at least 4 different distillations, and then through the peating of the barley or the strength of the distillate, you've suddenly got multiple Lego bricks to make whiskey with. Can you give us a bit of an overview that's a bit more succinct than what I am seeing?
Yeah, well, if you think we've been making whiskey in Scotland for several hundred years now, so there's a great understanding of the process itself and what you need to control, what factors you need to control to give a consistent spirit quality. But that understanding of controlling the factors to get the same spirit, by reverse, if you know how to control them, you know how to change them, you can then use that same understanding to create different flavors. And so that's what we're doing at Loch Lomond. If we look at the stills, you'll see we have the traditional swan neck pot stills.
Yes.
Have our unique straight neck pot stills. What the straight neck pot stills do is increase the amount of separation and flavors that happens during distillation. So it's really the same effect as having a very tall still neck. And we run those in 2 different ways. The first way is we'll take a tight cut. So on the spirit cut, we'll collect from 90 to 80%. So that's the high strength version.
Okay.
We'll run a pair of stills on the high strength setup for maybe 2 weeks. And then for the 3rd week, when we're running the still, we'll run it with a wide cut. We'll take the cut from 90 to 55%.
Wow. Okay.
That gives us 3 kind of unpeated spirit styles, like our base spirit styles, and then we do each of those at different peat levels. So that's where you go from 3 up to 8 different spirit styles.
Wow. So right away, still in the single malt realm, somebody's asked, actually, somebody said, Graham Fraser asked, is the straight-necked still also the Lomond still? And no, there's a clear difference there. I don't think we have any Lomond still.
There's a couple of technical differences with them. The Lomond stills, the still necks are kind of short and wide, where ours are I think about 4 meters tall.
Wow.
In a Lomond still, they only had 2 or 3 sets of plates, where we have 1 plate in the wash still and 17 in the spirit still.
17.
Yeah. So you can see we're getting a huge kind of copper contact and a huge amount of reflux there. And then a Lomond still, the plates were movable, so you could adjust, you take plates out or put plates in, whereas ours are fixed. So that's the technical differences.
And you don't have Lomond stills on site, right?
No.
Yeah.
I think Lomond stills were largely Hireman Walker. So I think they were started at Inverleven Distillery in Dumbarton,
Yes.
near to Loch Lomond. So that's where they took the name in the mid-50s. And they then put in, I think, Glenbergie, Milton Duff, and a couple of other Hireman Walker distilleries. Are still.
So I think Lomond stills have pretty much disappeared from the landscape of Scotch whisky now.
Yeah, I think there's one being used for gin at Bruichladdich.
The Bruichladdich, yes.
The Ugly Betty. I think that's one of the originals from Inverleven Distillery.
Correct. Yeah. So are there any other distilleries in Scotland that are currently using straight neck pot stills?
I think Inchdarney I think they call it their Lomond Hills still.
Okay.
And is similar in shape to ours. I don't know the specific design of it. Our stills they're created by Duncan Thomas, who was the owner of Little Mill between 1930s up to 70s. He put them in at Little Mill he really wanted to give a triple distilled character from a double distillation.
Yes. Yeah.
He wanted the ability to make more than one spirit type. So I think Little Mill did Little Mill, Dunglass, and Dumbuck. And when the current Loch Lomond distillery was built, it was built as an expansion of Little Mill. So they put the same type of stills in that Little Mill were using at the time.
I see. It was Inchdarney I had in my mind, but I couldn't remember if it was just a straight neck pot still that they put in, or actually some form of Lomond still. So that's interesting. You called it a Lomond Hill still?
I think they call it their Lomond Hill still.
Right. Okay.
I think they've paired it with a Swan neck still. I'm not 100% on that.
So before we even talk about the malt, before we've even talked about the peating of the malt, we've already got 2 distinctly different still types producing a different product. And when it comes to the straight neck stills, we've got a huge range of just down to the strength of the cut that you're taking, that gives you so much flexibility just in malt alone. Yes.
Yeah.
And then talk about. I'll try and pull this. Talk about what's happening here. Now, I think when I talk about malt, you guys have a capacity of, you're fairly significant, about 5 million liters or so. I don't know what you're actually running at, but that's your capacity.
Probably 3 million pot still single malt, and
right?
million from the continuous malt still.
Okay, that's exactly the question I was going to ask. So that theoretical capacity is 3 in your pot stills, and 2 million in your continuous still. So this copper-colored continuous still that we see here, this is only distilling a malted barley.
Yeah, so that works only off a malted barley wash, and it uses the same wash as the straight neck pot stills. So when we're mashing and fermenting, we don't differentiate between the wash that's going to the straight neck stills or the continuous malt still. So they're treated in the same way.
So you have a malt whiskey from those stills, but it can't be sold or marketed as a malt whiskey.
Yeah, because it's continuous distilled in a column
Yes.
still and not batch distilled in a pot still, it must be called single grain, irrespective of the starting material.
Okay, good. We're going to touch on that in a second as well. And then finally, the continuous. This is the silver still on the right hand side. This is much more something that you would happen up like maybe at North British, at Cameron Bridge, Invergordon. This is more of the style of still that you would see at the large scale grain production facilities.
Yeah, so this is our conventional grain still. So it's runs on a wheat base mash.
Wheat, okay.
So it'll be 10% high enzyme malted barley and 90% wheat. And that'll, when we distill that, it's sort of the light character, typical Scotch grain whiskey that you use for blending.
Yes, of course. Fantastic. So I'll keep that handy. So if we need to call on it again, we can. That's good. I'll be able to pick it up from there. So already, just in the still types, we've got a kind of mind-blowing selection of products there. And when we talk about those two styles of whiskey, we've got malt and everything that was in that kind of copper color there, and grain in the silver color. You've got within your facility there at Loch Lomond. But you're already starting to push things a little bit there, because what you have is the ability to make single malt product, which is your Inchmurren, Inchmoan, your standard Loch Lomond, your 12, your 18, your Loch Lomond original. They're all standard single malts. But you've also got a product there, and it's one that I enjoyed last year on holiday. And when I was in Spain, I bought a bottle of Loch Lomond, and it was single grain whiskey that I bought. But looking at the label, you could see it was written everywhere that it was made from 100% malted barley. It was presented at 46% without age statement. But I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed that bottle of whiskey, and it made a fabulous, and I can see why it sells in Spain, because it makes a fabulous light summer drink. I enjoyed it with ice. I enjoyed it with ice and soda. I enjoyed it neat on its own. I found it to be a very flexible thing. So tell us about that. Did you always know that putting that out there, you were going to have to call it single grain? Was that always something that you?
No, say when we installed the still, we started work probably on the design of the still about 2005, and the installation of the still was 2007.
Right.
And if you think about the Scotch whisky regulations, it's
2009.
So for 2 years of production, we were able to call it single malt. But then when the whiskey regulations kicked in, I think there were some wording changes in response to us having this still. And I think that's when they put in the batch and pot still for single malt in addition to the 100% malted barley mash.
So anything that's called single malt has to be batch produced from 100% malted barley in a pot still. You're covering two of those because it's only one. It's 100% malted barley, but you're running through a continuous still.
Yeah.
Super interesting. So what we're able to do there, and this is available from other countries. If I remember rightly, Nika produce a coffee grain and a coffee malt. So they're kind of takes on a similar theme. But we're able to taste a Scotch whisky then that's 100% malted barley through a continuous still. That can't be a common thing. Is that unique?
I think it is unique. There's starting to appear some Scotch grain whiskies that are combinations of malt and rye or malt and oats distilled through pot stills. Because of the grain content. They're fall into the single grain category. But this, I think, is the only one, because of the style of distillation from 100% malted barley, that it's termed a single grain.
Okay. So already, I mean, people are starting to perhaps think forward. I mean, something I'm going to ask you now is that you've got malt production on site, you've got grain production on site, and you've got this kind of intermediate, this malt production through a continuous still that is, it has to be termed grain, but it is malt production. So if you take some of your malt whiskey and some of your grain whiskey, or even if you take your malt whiskey and some of your malt that's come through the continuous still, and you blend that together, have you just, is that a sixth category that's currently undefined of Scotch whiskey?
It is an old category that disappeared in 2009.
Single blend.
There was a single blend category up until 2009. And the current regulations actually took that category away.
So does that mean that you can't put single blend on a bottle, or
No.
are you then, you have to call it a blended Scotch?
You need to call it a blended Scotch. There is, however, kind of, they did put in a trade-off that if you put a distillery name on a product, 100% of that liquid must be distilled at that distillery. So kind of by default, if you see a blend with a distillery name, then you know it must be a single blend.
Okay, so that's fascinating to me. Okay, so if I buy a bottle of Loch Lomond whiskey and it says on the label blended Scotch, we know that that's a single blend.
Yeah.
And the reason we know that is that it doesn't say single blend, but it's blended Scotch and it says Loch Lomond on it. So, and part of the regulations, if you want to display the name of the distillery, all the product inside that bottle has to come from that distillery, but it's blended. Yeah. So therefore we have the category of single blend. Fascinating. I'm going to ask some questions from the barflies, because the chat, that's there's lots of orange lighting up here, but I'm fascinated by what you're saying. But what we did earlier today, Michael, is that when I went out to drop off some of my packages and pick up some essential items, let's say, I was able to have a bit of a 2-meter sanitized handover, because there was a couple of samples that you wanted to share with me in order to highlight some of the topics that we're discussing. So at any point, what I've been doing actually as a setup is enjoying 2 blends and comparing those. So if there's any of these samples that's relevant to the discussion, mention it, and I'd be very happy to pour it and sip it along with you. So I'll just follow your lead on that. Donner Pass Whiskey saying I had a 22-year-old 100% malt single grain Loch Lomond. Where did that come from? If that still was not built yet. So it's a 22-year-old 100% malt single grain Loch Lomond.
I don't know if that would have been 100% malt. It would either have been old raw stew, which was pot still distilled.
Okay.
And when we started distilling with the continuous malt still, we used the raw stew name.
Yes.
Or from the kind of wheat-based grain.
Okay. And I've not even touched on all the different brands and the different terminologies that can come out of Loch Lomond as well, but do you ever find yourself getting confused?
All the time.
Good. I'm very glad.
I probably spend about half my time trying to keep everyone else in the distillery straight on what's what and what I'm putting in where and that. So it's.
I'm very grateful that the whiskey maker has to concentrate to keep up as well. George Kaplan is saying, "I like this rabbit hole," and he's putting a little Ardy emoji, a little rabbit emoji as well. Good to have you in, George. Also, a slight distraction. Everyone's asked a good question. He's asked, please ask Michael what he's most proud of, whiskey expression wise, and what whiskey he's made that surprised him or he's discovered. What's one of your favourite whiskies that you've made, Michael?
Probably the one I'm most proud of is the Loch Lomond 12-year-old. And that's just, I love subtle flavors in that. It's not a big in-your-face whiskey, but you talked about going searching for flavors, and that's one. When I drink it, I'm always picking out like 2 or 3 different flavors with every sip.
Yep.
It's something that I've tried to make our flagship expression. I've tried to put as much of the distillery in as I can, and that's with the combination of spirit styles I've used. Tried to kind of bring out as much fruit as I can with like the American oak sweetness and a very soft peat note on the end. So like the flavors are kind of in check with it.
It's very interesting.
Or getting that balance and then maintaining that kind of year to year, I think is probably makes it my favorite of our whiskies and the one I'm most proud of.
That's very interesting, and it's nice that you've presented it at 46% as well. This is a very affordable whiskey. There's a nice oiliness to it. There is that slightly challenging. I know you say it's a nice easy drinker, but I find with both Loch Lomond's, the 18 and the 12, that there's enough boldness and character in there. This is not. I mean, I really do feel this is a kind of much more traditional, old school style of whiskey. Kind of much more on maybe a Western Highland style, that kind of, and the peat is there, but it's very, very soft. You only really notice it now and again, or perhaps when you're sipping it in contrast with something that's maybe unpeated. But you can see how much I'm enjoying this. I've got through this remarkably quickly, given how many bottles I have open. And I also know that my peer creator over in Canada, Mark Kaufman from Whiskey Whistle, raves about Loch Lomond 12-year-old. He absolutely loves it.
Yeah, I think he had it as his Whiskey of the Year in the start of 2019. So,
and it's great when a Whiskey of the Year, when somebody nominates a Whiskey of the Year that folk can actually go out and buy virtually everywhere. This is distributed globally, right?
Yeah, I think we're in about 120 markets with the Loch Lomond range. So we're kind of, it's taken like 4 or 5 years to get there, but we've probably put as much work into the distribution, like getting our whiskies into people's hands, as we have on the liquid and the packaging itself.
Tony Nelson is saying, do you seek out independent versions of Loch Lomond Spirit? And have you found yourself ever been disappointed? I think what Tony is probably reflecting on there is a time when both Glen-Scotia and Loch Lomond, even when they were independents, could often be a try before you buy. Do you ever find yourself trying to source older stuff? There can't be much value in that to you. You're probably much more focused on the future, right?
I know there's been a shift in focus over the last 5-6 years. The old kind of family ownership was very much focused on blends, and they did blends very well. They dabbled in malts,
sure,
didn't commit to them in any way, and that really led to variability in quality. And
on the malt side,
I think unfortunately that led to a lot of disappointment for people. Over the last 5 years, with the change in ownership, the first change in 2014, the whole focus of the company shifted onto single malt. There was investment in the plant, wood, packaging, the people there to deliver it in terms of like even marketing, sales, and a financial commitment to it.
Sure.
Down stock. and setting aside stock so that we could move from a 3-year-old model up to a 12, 18 and higher.
Which is significant, which is significant.
So
that's something that you see that's happening in the industry as a whole, where there's Loch Lomond been very much set up to being very good at producing blends under their own labels and brands, but also I imagine they would have been doing it under contract for lots of third parties as well, making blends for various people. Yes.
Yeah. So our own kind of main product would have been High Commissioner. We would have made probably up to about 800,000 cases a year of that. So that's probably around the 4 million litres mark.
Yes.
On top of that, we sold another 8 million litres of blend every year. We did sell to likes of La Martini case.
Yes.
That was their label 5. So again, one of the biggest blends in France.
Okay.
And we also sold to Pitters, who had, I think it's William Peel, which again, another of the top blends in France. So our whiskies went into like some really big players in the blend market. But probably from 2010 on, like the blend market really start to soften.
Yes, absolutely.
I know we've seen this kind of change where like we're starting to see single malt kind of stay steady about 10% of Scotch volume. Now seeing that creep up to 15.
Yes.
Growth's kind of going one way. So when the new owners came in, they kind of turned the focus of the business on to single malt, and that's kind of what we're doing now.
So really what we're saying is that in one site at Loch Lomond, at that site up there in Alexandria, you have the ability to make any category of Scotch that exists, except for, because it's all single site, you can't make a blended malt unless you draw in Glen Scotia, and you can't make a blended grain. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But you can make malt, you can make blends, you can make grains. And so just this is kind of so your focus is now on single malt. If we look at just the facility in Alexandria, you've got 3 brands. If I'm correct, you've got Loch Lomond, Inchmurren, and peated Inchmone. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's current. That will be changing sort of later this year, and we'll be bringing the Inchmurren and Inchmone under Loch Lomond.
Okay.
It's you talked about confusion there, and we're finding that even with the 3 brands, we're getting people who are looking at our whiskies are kind of struggling to see. We're getting questions like, where's the Inchmurren distillery? Is it Inchmurren that's peated and Inchmone that's unpeated? Or
yes,
it's hard for people to grasp quickly the links between the 3 brands. So we're going to bring them all under Loch Lomond kind of over the course of this year.
That I've made that mistake myself in the past. I've got them confused where I've thought that Inchmurren was peated and Inchmone was unpeated. So it's interesting you're doing that. So you're just going to have a much more kind of a much more horizontal range of everything being branded Loch Lomond.
Yeah,
but you'll still have peated. So if I remember correctly, Inchmurren is kind of more of a fruity, unpeated style, right? There's a little bit of peat in Loch Lomond. There's a lot of peat in Inchmone, but there's no peat in Inchmurren. Is that correct?
So Loch Lomond, there's that little bit of peat, and then Inchmurren and Inchmone kind of sit at the extremes to that. So Inchmurren is totally unpeated, very fruity style. Inchmone is fully peated, so it's distilled from all heavily peated malt.
Interesting. So that's new branding is coming along. Tony Nelson is saying, yes, it is confusing. I never know how to describe my Inchmurren, Loch Lomond, a labyrinth of flavour. Yeah, I mean, there was somebody else mentioned that as well. One of the other comments I was reading is that I think it was Tim at Donner Pass Whiskey had suggested that he finds it difficult to articulate the flavours that he picks up in his standard Loch Lomond expressions. And I'm very much the same. Once I kind of run, there is fruit here, but I can never determine what the fruit is. Sometimes it plays a little bit like a black cherry note, and other times it kind of gets a wee bit tropical. I find it difficult to articulate as well. As the whiskey maker, how would you, if anybody is out there is sipping a standard Loch Lomond, how would you, this is the one with a little bit of peat in it, of course.
So that's the Loch Lomond 12. I would always say it's like an apple.
Right, yeah, okay.
On it with kind of lemon citrus.
So that would be your fruit.
Yeah.
Do you get any kind of like a darker base note in there, almost like a kind of, I don't know if it's agricultural or industrial, but something that's a bit more kind of dank, a bit more. I don't know. I don't want to say oily or anything, but it's something a little. I tend to just call it an old school, more traditional kind of note. Would you pick that up at all? Or? I want to say it is a bit oily. It is a bit like a mechanical almost.
So we've made a conscious decision to bottle kind of 12 and up at 46%. So that does really help with the mouthfeel.
Oh yeah.
Keep the kind of viscosity up and the body up on it.
So when you're the 12-year-old and up at 46, that means that you're unchill filtering. It's just a kind of a basic filter, right?
Yeah. So we're really particle filtering to take out any barrel char, and that's it.
Okay. People are asking me to see Greg's question. Greg's Whiskey Guide. Can you ask Michael where the Loch Lomond single malt brand and trademark green vegetal elements come from? So he's probably getting some of that as well. So would you say most of the flavour in this whiskey then is coming from your fermentation? Is it coming from this 12-year-old? Is this mostly Swan Neck or is this Straight Neck stills?
No, it's a combination of 4 different spirit styles. So it's the 3 combination of the 3 unpeated styles and a medium peated, straight neck, low strength.
So we would be able to see that from
probably
our
graphic. So about 60% from the straight neck stills over 3 different styles.
Yep.
And about 40% from the Swan Necks unpeated.
So here we are here, Loch Lomond 12-year-old.
Yeah, so it's that top line.
Fascinating. So there's 1 component coming from Swan Neck, 3 components coming from the straight stills, and a little bit of the medium peated component in there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers Greg's question there, but that in itself has got to be quite a unique thing.
I think for Greg's question there, a lot of the fruit character is coming from the fermentation, because we use, starting with the yeasts, we use a different type of yeast for the Swan Neck stills and for the straight neck pot stills. So we did a lot of work in the early 2000s on different types of distillers yeast. So for the straight necks, we use a combination of M and MX. And for the Swan Neck stills, we use I think it's a Lomond dry yeast.
Right. Okay. And when we talk about rabbit holes, one of the
Yeah.
samples you handed me. I'll maybe save it for the end because I don't even know if we've got time to cover it. But interestingly, I've kind of reached out to the community, to the barflies, and asked them what kind of topics do you want, and barley came quite high up in the feedback. People would like to talk about barley, but what came very, very close behind barley, and I was fascinated by, is that people want to talk about yeast. In one of the samples that you handed me tonight shows that you're experimenting beyond that you've already done, and you've actually given me a wine yeast sample. So that's we could be here. It's what I think we've got across that concept, that within that one site in Loch Lomond, the potential is huge. Do you feel then, Michael, given my presentation here today based on that idea that there are only two styles of Scotch whisky, what you've proven here is that concept maybe of heavy regulation, heavy definition. Do you feel then that actually there's lots of scope to play and explore?
Yeah. First, I would say I support the regulations, because it's very important that people have confidence when they're buying Scotch, that they know what they're getting, in terms of the kind of provenance of the product.
Yes.
What I kind of differ from some people's view of the regulations is that they see them as restrictive. But if you look at them closely, there's so much scope there for innovation and development. I couldn't see myself finishing it all in my lifetime. If I started tomorrow and could do everything I wanted, I couldn't finish it in 30, 40 years time.
That's very interesting to hear.
You look at especially the likes of the single grain category. You look at the possibilities that there are there with likes of rye, oats, unmalted barley, all those different grains that you can use that come under the single grain category.
Yes.
When you look at malt production, we touched on the wine yeast. You look at how brewers treat their yeast, where every style of beer and nearly every individual brewery will have their own yeast type.
Yes, yes.
I think that's kind of been the flavor part of yeast has kind of been pushed into second place for yield for distillers.
Yes.
And we're starting to kind of change that focus now. That's even then you go into temperature control of fermentation, still cut points, on our continuous malt still, we have 8 plates at the top of the second column. So we can take spirit off in any combination of those 8 plates. You then start to think how many combinations of spirit character can I get from playing with the still setup on that.
So what that's when you're talking about lifetimes and things. What you're talking about there, all the things that you talk about, is just this is at the whiskey creation point.
Yeah,
this is way before anything's been matured. This is you starting at ground zero and working out the whiskey that you actually could potentially or want to make. So you're actually at the point. We've already established that it's confusing just to keep track of what's available now. And within the regulations, you feel that there's so much scope for innovation that you couldn't exhaust it.
Yeah.
If you were able to do all the things that you want.
I think if you look at how bourbon's kind of growing, and the different mash bills, again, that's changing people's awareness of the impact of grain on flavor.
Yes.
If you look at probably one of the restrictions about spirit development is that for 12-year-olds, you have to wait 12 years to find out if what worked. So if you're lucky, you'll get 3 goes at it in a lifetime in or distilling career. But I think you talked, was it on Sunday night, about age statements and how you're seeing more like 5 and 8-year-old age statements coming out.
Yes.
Like Ardbeg, Wee Beastie.
Wee Beastie from Ardbeg, yep.
So age statements, acceptance of lower age statements, is starting to come round.
Yes.
And if you're looking at spirit development, a 5-year cycle is a lot more manageable than a 12 or 15.
Yes.
So that could lead distillers to be more open to looking at spirit development.
And I think it's if you place that product honestly, and I think if you target the more enthusiast type consumer, they're very happy to lead and help educate. Because I think if you're going to put a 5-year age statement on it, you're going to make the spirit with the intention of maturing it less. So it's going to be a different style of spirit to start with, and you're going to be very, very careful about the casks that it goes into, all the while knowing that this is going to be released at some point, hopefully at a very young age. I think it changes everything. Do you think that we're going to see some Loch Lomond product in the future? That's because I know that underneath your 12, you've got the original, which is a non-age statement. Your single grain is non-age statement. Yes. Is there a temptation to maybe consider age statements there, or
we've 3 expressions kind of aimed for supermarket distribution. The original, which kind of 5 to 8-year-old no age statement. The classic, the 5-year-old, again without an age statement, and a Loch Lomond 10-year-old. So we have, I think, 10s as those we've gone with the age statements. I don't know if it's something we do for that kind of channel.
okay.
But it's something we're kind of more conscious of now. I would probably see us more likely to put out a single malt with a 5-year-old age statement.
Okay. Well, I've managed to curate a few questions from the barflies for you, so I'll give you a couple of these. Menno is asking, how does the straight neck still influence compared to the swan neck still the flavour of the new make? Is it different reflux? Is it different yeast you've touched upon, or different barley? I think you're using the same barley. We've touched on the yeast. So what's the difference in profile between?
The main difference is, I think you said it there, the reflux and how it separates out the flavors during distillation. The straight neck stills are far more selective in what they allow to pass into the new make.
Okay.
Far greater concentration of the kind of lighter estery, sweet fruit character. And it's much harder for anything like sulfury, heavy, oily to get through the straight neck.
So it's kind of going to be a much cleaner, brighter, fruitier spirit that's going to come out of the straight neck stills.
Like for likes of our expressions, we'll use kind of the straight neck stills probably at 5-year-old. The swan necks would start to use at 8, but still even at 12, you're getting some of the, I think you said that vegetal or maybe that kind of farmyard smells maybe coming from the swan neck.
The swan neck stills.
So I think it's really the kind of the reflux and the selection of flavors from the straight neck still that gives the difference.
It's fascinating. That's fascinating. Mark at Whiskey Whistle is here. He's in and he said, Roy, tell Michael, single grain, malted dry in the copper column would rock Canada and give Lot 40. So he's talking about Don Livermore there, a run for its money. Is there any temptation for you to run a different grain through that?
There's been more than a temptation. It's something I've been asking for probably 2 or 3 years now. So I think we've we've just been that busy with getting like our malts set up and established that we haven't really kind of had time for spirit development. But looking at grains for that still is kind of I don't know if it's top of my list, but it's kind of up there.
That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. That is interesting. So, I mean, again, we've just laid on another layer of potential of products that could come from that. That's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating, Mark. I'm glad you asked that question. Good to have you in as well, Mark. Mose Chun has just bought a dram and said, "Cheers, Roy and Michael. How important are the worm tubs? You don't have worm tubs, do you?"
No, we're all
Shell and tube. Shell and tube. Worm and the signature of Loch Lomond. So, I mean, I guess the same question applies. I could just ask you generally, do you think that condensers, in your experience, are because we talk about worm tubs, places like Craigellachie, places like Mortlach, and we see even new distilleries are going that extra step to put in and invest in maybe worm tub condensation. Do you see that having a huge impact on the final spirit?
Yep. I think it does lead to like a heavier or fuller bodied spirit.
Yes.
There's kind of partly due to less copper contact, so there's less kind of cleaning up the spirit as it's condensing.
Absolutely. But you don't have any plans to be swapping out any condensers at Loch Lomond anytime soon. And I've also got Skogsmar, the same question for Michael. When you have a dram to, there's a good question. I know the answer to this, but I'll let you answer it, Michael. When you have a dram to relax, do you only drink your own product, or do you stay clear? I think he's asking what do you relax with? Only Loch Lomond products, or
no? So I try and drink a range. So I'll look at like Irish bourbon, kind of any kind of whiskey that's sort of out there. So I like tasting different flavors. I like looking for different experiences. Probably my two kind of top at the minute, it would be a Redbreast 12.
Nice.
And the Baines single grain.
Nice. Baines as well. South African, right? I think it's a Distell brand. And obviously Redbreast. You know, the Redbreast I think is a beautiful spirit. I prefer the Redbreast higher strength. But I think it's the Redbreast, the Standard 12 is a lovely, lovely spirit. It's one of my favourites, and I love that style.
I'd love to try the cast strength 12, but
it's
I think House Whiskey pays the bills, and I need to get approval to buy anything whiskey wise. So
you recently shared with me one that you'd bought that was off-brand. Are you willing to share the one that you've recently bought that you're looking forward to trying?
The one that we were tasting today?
No. The one I think you mentioned to me in an email that you just invested in a Campbelltown one, and it's not a Glen Scotia.
Oh no, it's I want to get the Kilkerran 12.
Oh, you don't have it yet?
From the way you talked about it last Thursday, that's kind of hit a note with me. So that's, I think, top of the list for my Father's Day.
Presents. When is Father's Day? When's Father's Day?
I think June.
Oh, okay. There's quite a way to wait. Well, I've got Kilkerran on hand, Michael, and I owe you in exchange for a couple of the samples that you handed me today. So if you're looking to try any Kilkerrans, I'm more than happy to pass some along. I find them to be fantastic, honestly. So that's interesting as well. And you like a wee pot still Irish whiskey now and again as well?
Yes, I will have the Pars John Lane's 12. As well as the Redbreast here, but I think the Pars is a bit lighter, a bit spicier, just more on the Redbreast, so it kind of edges it over the Pars.
My favorite. Actually, I don't have a favorite because they're all slightly different. The richness of the Yellow Spot 12 is fantastic. The clean, light oiliness of the standard Green Spot, I love. Powers, the John's Lane Powers one you're talking about. Yeah, I love the spice that's there. And of course, that comes at 46% as well, which is nice, as does Yellow Spot. The Green Spot doesn't. Whiskey Dram is saying it was really interesting to try the new make from the different stills and cuts when I visited. So the Whiskey Dram, that's Daniel, he must have been up there. He said you can then more easily pull out where the different whiskey flavours come from. Fantastic. And Cresimir is saying Loch Lomond seems to have fun playing with different angles when it comes to producing whiskey. I think that's coming across. I think it would be hard, Michael, for you to, I don't know, to switch and go and make whiskey somewhere else.
Yeah, it's really I studied brewing and distilling at university. I started out wanting to make kind of whiskey and beer. So I've spent like the last 20 years in kind of fermentation and that kind of yeast and flavor creation. So it just, Loch Lomond kind of sits well with how I think about flavor. And it gives me a lot of kind of freedom to play with that.
So are you now, since 2007 to now, you're now at the point where you're being able to draw on a lot of the product that you've actually been responsible to help make and help define and help specify at the production stage. You're able to draw and make whiskey from your own products now. That must be inspiring. That must be exciting.
Probably when I started at Loch Lomond, John Peterson was doing a lot of the trial work on likes of the wine yeast. So he was kind of unsure whether to kind of go ahead with it, and that's something kind of tasted it, and like I said to John, like we should be doing this every year, and kind of luckily since then we've managed to do some of the wine yeast production every year now, so we're starting to hit like a continuous stock of the wine yeast.
Wine yeast. Okay, so I think I'm going to try that in a second. The first thing I'm going to do, though, I've enjoyed this. I think this is one of your standard signature blends. Yeah. Standard presentation for a blend at 40% here. But you've got an interesting one here. What is this you've given me? That's it's non-age statement again, but it's 46%. It's actually labeled as a single cereal blend. Tell me what this is.
So this is a blend that we supply to a third party. It was really last year we were approached by kind of a Langston Liquor Company, and they started off as kind of bar managers, started their own kind of bars. And then from that, they looked for base spirits for cocktails.
Yep.
First was Porter's Gin. Then after that, they wanted a whiskey that could be used for highballs. So they set out with that specific aim of creating a whiskey purely for mixing. So they came to us and they wanted that kind of real, kind of pretty zesty, crisp character that had enough weight to hold its own when mixed, but then didn't clash when it's been mixed. So I think you touched on having the Loch Lomond single grain in a highball.
Yes.
I think so. This blend, we're actually using that single grain, the malt-based single grain, as a blending single grain, and we've combined that with 20% single malt from our straight night pot stills.
Yes.
So the actual makeup of the blend is 100% malted barley, 20% single malt pot still distilled, and 80% single grain column distilled.
So this is a single blend.
Yeah.
I have to say, now this is 46%. I think that's helping it a lot. But I mentioned earlier to you, the standard signature blend that I had is very soft, very nice and sweet and easy. This has got so. I know that it's created for bartenders to make, but this is a gorgeous sipper.
Yeah.
The fruitiness is there, the zestiness is there that you talk about, but to me, there's a huge pear note. It's very confidence pear. That kind of you can almost get the texture of a pear from it. It's creamy. There's nice body to it. There's so much more to this blend than just being the base for a mixer. Surely,
I was sorry to see it going to somebody else and us not bottling it ourselves. I think
you would like to have a Loch Lomond brand on this.
Yeah, I would like to have Loch Lomond on that rather than the glass.
So can people buy this? Can this be bought?
Yeah.
I know it's not your product, but
so it's called the Glasshouse whiskey.
Right. Okay.
Available through Royal Mile and Masters of Malt. So it retails about £29-30 a bottle.
Okay, they're listing it as blended Scotch.
Yep.
That looks like a blog post on it. So it's available from Master and Malt. Yeah, 30 quid. Glasshouse, I can see it there. Fantastic. To me, it's very interesting because we've got a blend, but not as you know it, right? And the way it's presented, it says on the sample that it's non-chill filtered natural color. Is that true? For the product
I've given you is non-chill filtered and natural color. I know the Glasshouse is bottled 46% non-chill filtered. I'm not sure about the color.
Okay.
So
okay.
It may be that they do natural color, but I'm not 100% on that.
Okay. Fascinating. So now I know that was a quick diversion there. Talk to me about, I know if I don't talk about it, I'm going to get people chiming in. Speak to me about, there's two I want to talk about quickly. And one I'm fascinated about is this yeast. You're using a wine yeast. And this looks to be a 12-year-old product, 46% again, non-chill filtered, wine yeast combination. So you're not using distiller's yeast here, you're using wine yeast, as you touched on earlier.
A bit of distiller's yeast in there, but most of the yeast is wine yeast.
Okay. And you feel strongly that there's a difference here, purely at the feet of the different yeast used. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that's all been from fermentation?
Yeah. The difference is it's a combination of the fermentation, but also the straight neck pot stills. You need the fermentation with the wine yeast. You need a longer fermentation because they don't grow so well on the sugars that are in malted barley port. So you need to give them that kind of 4-day time scale to kind of ferment and create the flavors. You then need your distillation to be able to pick out those flavors, kind of pull them together so that they're kind of distinct coming through the new make spirit.
So that's very deliberate, that design, that fermentation and distillation has to be both considered.
Yeah. And that's, we know other distillers have tried wine yeast and not had success with them. And part of that is down, I think it's down to the stills we have, that we're better able to pull those flavors out.
So talk to me here. I mean, this is very reminiscent to me of it's beautifully fruity, but there's a nice floral note to it as well. This is jumping out the glass. The nose on this is gorgeous. And
I think you've hit it there. It's the main difference with the wine yeast is the intensity of the fruit character. You get it on the nose, you get like a zinginess on the tongue, and then you get it in the length of finish.
That's like a completely different drink. That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. That's Loch Lomond spirit. That's
So
you
that
using
is basically Inch Marin 12-year-old.
unpeated then, yes.
Yep. Unpeated, straight neck pot still, high collection strength. 12 years in about 80% refill American oak, 20% first fill American oak. The difference is the wine yeast and how it's been fermented.
So you can define that. You can say the clear difference here is not the elements that you've just described to me, I understand, in the casks, but you know as the whiskey maker that the big difference here, the reason that we're having this bouquet on this glass is down to the yeast.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Can this be bought? Is this available for sale now?
We are looking at doing a 12-year-old special edition this year. So I'm hoping that will be available within the next few months.
This has to be released. People have to be able to taste this, Michael. This is, I mean, it's just a beautiful whiskey. That's fascinating to me. I know that people, there's a huge drive towards barley just now. There's a huge drive towards different yeasts. It's an exciting time, I think, because as a drinker, we're going to be able to experience these things in the very near future, and that's wonderful to me. I have to say, this isn't what I've come to associate with Loch Lomond, but I think I mean that in a very, very positive way. It's just another string to your bow. It's another. There's no peat in this, of course. I'm not picking up a lot of that kind of agricultural, a lot of that vegetal note that we were talking about that could perhaps be coming from the Swan Neck stills.
Yeah, I think it is. It's that kind of Swan Neck. They do get like it is like a longer maturing spirit. So even at 12, I think there is that kind of farmyard element coming through. But with this, it's all straight neck at the high cut. So it's like a very clean, estery new make spirit. And with the wine yeast, we just dial up that kind of esteriness.
I have to say, it's Moorish. There's another whiskey I want to pour before we go on to talking. I think you're going to stay in and participate in the quiz with us tonight, Michael. But there's two things I want to touch on before we finish up. The first thing is, I think we've managed to get a point across that there are only two Scotches. The defined categories are there, but you're proving, or you're just by thinking about the whiskey at the production end before it gets to the point of maturation.
Yeah,
you're proving that there is lots of flexibility. There's still lots of unexplored territory there within the definitions.
Yeah,
and that's fascinating to hear, because that's a completely different perspective to what we've kind of been led to believe, that these definitions are kind of very, very frustrating sometimes. It can only be in oak, and it can only be from 100% malt and things, and actually no, it's just it can only be those things if you want to label it in a certain way. I think you're also in a very fortunate position to be making whiskey at Loch Lomond, I have to say as well.
Yes, I think we're not an established single malt, so we don't have that pressure of trying to meet the perception of a brand that's been there for the last 20, 30, 40 years. I think that can sometimes stifle like innovation, where you have a core of people buying your whiskey who have an expectation of what they're going to get with that. And
that's a good point.
At Loch Lomond, we've only been doing the single malt, kind of focusing on it for the last 5 years, so we're still establishing Loch Lomond, but we want to establish Loch Lomond as a distillery that kind of creates the flavour at the beginning rather than
Yes.
on the wood.
Yes.
So we want people to know that when you're buying Loch Lomond, it is that distillery-led character. It is the stills, the fermentations, the yeast that are kind of driving the flavor you're tasting.
Okay. You have the luxury of being able to behave in a wee bit more maverick a fashion. You can be a bit more free about it, about what you're doing. I'm going to grab one more clean glass because I've still got drams in the ones I've poured so far. And we're going to talk about I'm going to talk to you about water in a second, but there's another one I'm interested in that you've given to me, and I'm very intrigued by. And I'm going to throw this out to the chat. This is Loch Lomond peated single grain. Now, you mentioned this to me when we were speaking on the phone, and I came away and I was trying to. This is just how confusing it can be, because I walked away thinking, well, are they peating wheat? What? I don't understand what's happening here. But of course, no. This is peated malt going through the continuous still.
Yeah.
Correct.
So this particular expression is heavy peated. So it's 50 ppm phenol.
50. That's up at, that's almost as high. That's Ardbeg.
That's Lagavulin, Ardbeg type levels.
Yep. And yet, so the nose is very sweet nose. Is there an age on this?
It'll be bottled as no age statement. It will be.
So this is something that's coming.
Yeah. So that is. I think somebody had asked about COVID situation. It's kind of impacting on our release schedule for the year. So this is one product that is down for release at some point this year.
Lovely mouthfeel. The sweetness that's on the nose doesn't. Sometimes when a Southern Islay, like a Lagavulin, some Ardbegs, there's a real kind of powdered sugar sweetness behind the peat. This is sweet, but it's sweet in a different way. This isn't like a powdered sugar. It's more like there's a butteriness here as well.
I really get like a Clove Rock sweetness.
Clove Rock.
Yeah.
What is Clove Rock?
It's
a Northern Irish thing or something?
It's probably a Northern Irish sweetie. So it's be one of your like sour plumes type.
Ah, okay.
But it's that kind of really like sweet clove, like sweet spice character.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. The spice is very sweet. It's quite a nice coating. It's quite an oily spirit, isn't it? Would you expect any kind of difference in the texture of the spirit coming out of the continuous still over a pot still, or how does it affect the body?
It does give a lighter body. It is column distilled, so you are taking more out of the spirit.
And yet, I don't know if this camera is going to be able to focus on just how clinging that's. I know, I appreciate what you're saying, but it does play very. For
a grain whiskey, we take off the still at 85% rather than 84.
Okay.
So we're taking more out than a pot still, but we're not taking as much out as a conventional wheat-based still. And the second thing is, again, it's bottled at 46%.
So again, we're speaking about this. This is peated whiskey, but it's not like any Islay.
No. Again, you're starting malt is like Islay. Well, with it being it's northeast Scotland peat we're using, so, but it is to the same strength as you would find on Islay.
Yes.
And how you distill peat, I think, has a huge influence on what you taste when you're drinking it.
Yeah, we often talk about the ppm levels. That's the malt specification rather than the specification of what's actually in the bottle. But that's another fascinating thing. But you're going to have to label this single grain.
Yeah.
So 100% peated malt.
It's something we're happy doing because it adds to kind of our story.
Yes, absolutely.
It's something that, we're talking about distillation and the flavors we get from distillation. So having the peated single grain fits kind of nicely in with Loch Lomond.
Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, I'm sure John Glazer would love to play with all these novelties. And Eric Evanson is saying, a few years back, I read something that Loch Lomond refurbishes casks they use. Is this true for Mike? So you've got your own cooperage there on site. I remember seeing that. I remember getting a demonstration there. It was fantastic to see. I saw a cask getting stripped and recharred in the space of just a few minutes. But I guess that like so many distilleries up and down the country, you're doing that and using those casks, but you have the ability to do it on site.
Yeah. So I think we're one of 4 distilleries with an on-site cooperage. I think Glenmorangie, Girvan are 2 of the others. So at the moment we have 5 coopers on the bench and 3 apprentices. So we'll repair in the region of about 20,000 casks a year.
Wow.
So 10,000 of that will be a straight repair and 10,000 will be a dechar rechar. I think that's the refurbishing the question was about.
Yeah. Service office, that's Andreas is saying, I came to this vPub knowing nothing about Loch Lomond, no connection to it. I've only tried the 12 and the 18. Now I feel like I have to try a lot more from them. I have to say it's exciting times. I mean, you've demonstrated to us here that within the categories, firmly within the categories of Scotch whisky, you're still going to be labelling all of these products as Scotch, but just some of the fantastic variation that can be born from those 2 basic styles. That's quite fascinating. A peated single grain made from 100% malted barley through a continuous still. That's a cool thing for an enthusiast right there. Will it be released with an age statement or non-age statement? Because you're
non-age statement.
Non-age statement.
Yeah, but it'll be 4-year-old spirit we're using.
Just put 4 years on it.
Yeah.
If it's as good as this, you'll have an army of evangelists. Just even if it doesn't lead with 4 years, it would be fantastic to see more of that coming out. Honestly, but if you've tuned into the vPubs long enough, Michael, you'll know how I feel about things like that. Keith Corbett is saying, Aquavite looked like hiking pants, not pajamas. I'm in shorts tonight, Keith. Yes, absolutely. I think we reached 14 degrees Celsius here in Scotland today, so that's shorts and t-shirt weather, believe me. Jimmy Legg is saying, this is my favourite distillery guest ever. He's saying, we're getting some real details here. It's a great thing. I agree with you, Jimmy. It's nice just to kind of have nights where you geek out a wee bit as well. Roy, where can we find the graphic for the Loch Lomond stills? Can you download it from the website, Michael? Or
it tends to be that it needs some explaining to go with it. So it's not usually available unless you've been to the distillery.
But if they contacted your team at the distillery, they could probably get a hold of it, right? And with any kind of relevant questions.
Yeah.
And anybody that's got questions here tonight and they've not been able to get me to relay the questions to Michael, put it underneath, not in the live chat, put it underneath the video. Leave a question there for Michael, and I'll encourage Michael, if I find any questions in there, I'll encourage Michael to pop in at his leisure and answer any questions that he can. Apologies if I've missed it. Last Drop is in saying, last week's video was a treat. Thank you very much, Chris. Eric is saying, a few years back, I read something at Loch Lomond. We picked up that one, Eric. Fantastic. And Menno is saying, I'm now slipping into Anorak, number 3 for the night, talking about yeast influence with 230 fellow geeks. Love this, love this, love this. Thank you, Menno. I'm glad you're enjoying it as well. Finally, just before we jump into the quiz, might slip over a wee bit late tonight, but not too bad. One of the most fascinating things, you could almost call it an epiphany moment, was in your lab there at Loch Lomond. And I talked to you about adding water to whiskey. And you were watering down your samples in the lab to 20% ABV or thereabouts. And you encouraged me to do the same. Sorry?
25%?
25, sorry. And you encouraged me to do the same. Before I'd sipped, nosed, or tasted anything, you said, okay, and the lab samples that you had, and I forget the lady, she was lovely, I forget her name.
Lorna or Julie?
I think she'd been there a long time, and I think she might have been ex-Diageo.
Lorna.
Lorna, fantastic. It was Lorna that was supplying the drams for us, or the samples for us. And we brought these samples down to 25% ABV and then nosed them at that strength. And it was amazing to me. Perhaps I'm not going to drink my whiskey forevermore at 25% ABV, but I try as much as possible to sacrifice at least 1 dram, a tiny dram, water it down, leave it in a glass, cover it for a little bit, come back and nose it at that strength. I'll never forget that lesson that was taught to me that day, Michael. It was quite unbelievable. Do you find yourself, is that because you're nosing all day, every day, that you take it down to that?
Really, kind of cast strength, natural strength, the flavors are kind of still concentrated, so it can be hard to kind of pick out the individual characters. So when you add water, bring it down to 25%, it really opens up character and allows you to pick out the very individual components. A lot softer in your nose. If you're nosing cast strength, you often feel that prickle.
Anesthetized, yep.
Yeah, you do kind of anesthetize your nose and your palate. So it's really twofold. It's kind of that sensitivity where you can go much deeper into the character, but it's also that so if I'm doing a cask selection for a single malt vatting, I'll be nosing 100 to 150 casks a day. And for that, I need to nose fresh. So it's just easier on the nose, and you get to pick out more of the individual flavors.
I do find that occasionally I will kind of sacrifice a dram by overwatering it, drowning it to the point that it's kind of gone. It's not that delicious. There's not much mouthfeel anymore, things like that. But if you're spending a night and if you're playing with it, if you come back, even when it's really watered down, you find yourself discovering elements that you wouldn't have had access to at the higher strength. Now, we love to enjoy the higher strength, cast strength whiskies. We do enjoy them as an experience. But it's kind of nice to have that flexibility there, add water and bring it down by step. But that was a very effective demonstration that day last year that I was nosing and sipping.
It's not how I drink my whiskey at home. I will add water, but it does, I think you've touched on it, it does weaken the taste and dilute the taste on the palate. Yep. It does give you an exceptional pickup on the nose, so it does really open up the nose for you, but you do lose that mouthfeel, that sensation when you actually drink. The grip,
the texture, the prickle, all of that, all the things that we come to love in the higher strength whiskies. But it's nice, and what we're doing, the way that we're enjoying whiskey, we're not drinking. For us, it's very much about taste over drinking. So it's nice to be able to do that. It's nice to be able to get whiskies that you can play with. And it's nice when they give things up after you play with them for a wee bit. Eric Evanson saying that explains why Ralphie waters down whiskey. Watch his Linkwood 12 Flora and Fauna video where he takes a 43% whiskey and he must water it down to something like 25% ABV and encourages you to do the same, probably for the very same reason that Michael's just discussed. Mark Whiskey Whistle saying, does Michael use distilled or spring water for dilution?
Tap water.
Fantastic. As long as
What
your
I would-
water isn't smelly, stinky, or taste of anything, it's fine.
What I would say is that probably the temperature of your water is more important than.
Room temperature, yep.
So any cold on it will kind of numb your tongue.
Yeah.
So when I go into work every morning, the first thing I do is pour out about 2 liters of water, and then I use that through the day for any tasting I'm doing.
This wine yeast sample, I'm getting a really rich Manuka honey now. I have to say, Michael, this is a cracking dram. We have to be able to buy this. And it has to be available as a malt, as a single malt. It has to be.
No, it will be coming out at some point this year. I'm being harassed for tasting notes on it at the minute. So the kind of packaging is under development. That's what it is. It's on its way.
That's good to hear. That's great to hear. Che Francis is saying, really enjoying this, really interesting. Cheers, Michael and Aquavite. Thanks, Che. Thanks so much. Che is saying Eric is saying for Mike, has Loch Lomond thought about port or sherry or wine cask finishing? You do that occasionally.
Port and sherry, we need to be very careful with. They're big flavors.
I'm thinking more of Glen Scotia.
Yeah, we use both kind of quite regularly at Glen Scotia. We've used some at Loch Lomond, probably more second fill sherry for kind of exclusive casks, bottlings. Probably the wine is something that we did last year for the Open.
The Open, yes.
The Open last year was played at Royal Portrush, which is home to 2 winners of the Claret Jug. So with that, like, I don't know if any other course that has that connection, that kind of 2 winners have called the course their own, and lifted the Claret Jug. So I used a Claret wine finish for our Open course collection at Royal Portrush last year.
Fantastic. That's not in the quiz tonight, but I do have a couple, 1 or 2 Loch Lomond-esque. So there's kind of freebie questions in there for you, Michael. If you're happy to stay for the quiz, it would be nice to have you participate if you're up for it. Thanks to everybody for joining and for staying. We're running a wee bit over. I expected that we might a wee bit. It's coming up on, we're just shy of 2 hours just now. So I'll get through the quiz quite quickly tonight. But I have found this absolutely fascinating. And we can never be friends, Michael, because I would never allow a friendship to develop. If I was in your company, I would simply just hang around and pick your brains and ask questions. And I'm sure you would tire of me very, very quickly. But thank you so much for the insight. Thanks so much for giving us access to things that we are not usually, we're not privileged to hear about the daily tasks of a whiskey maker, a master blender, and certainly one that has the tools available to him that you do. It's absolutely fascinating. We were already fans and we were already encouraged by the changes for the better that's coming out of the Glen Scotia releases and the Loch Lomond releases. But what you've shared with us tonight, I think, is even more exciting for the future as well. And it gives us an insight into not just new releases and new whiskies, but the flexibility that potentially can be unlocked with a wee bit of creative thought. And then you've kind of hinted at even going beyond what we've talked about tonight, like different grains, is on the back of Mark's comment and things like that, potentially a rye. And I mean, that would be absolutely fascinating for the future. So not just talking about how you've been able to leverage the flexibility now, but what's potentially open to you in the future as well. And I think that's going to help everybody get off this idea that the be all and end all is single malt. It's wonderful that we have such fantastic whiskies in that category, but also to kind of look outside the category a little bit and kind of enjoy whiskies for whiskey's sake and worry less about the definitions. Thank you so much, Michael. I hope it's been comfortable for you.
Yes, whiskey is my work, but I'm lucky to do something that I love, and I enjoy talking about whiskey as much as I do making it. So it's been
perhaps we can be friends.
really so.
And I have to say, that wasn't tongue in cheek when I said I've reached out to a barfly. You've commented on a couple of the vPubs. We've seen you comment on vPubs from time to time. You tend to take a back seat. You don't like to but make yourself known. Albeit if you do make yourself known, you might find yourself having to field a lot of questions. But it's fantastic that you do enjoy kind of relaxing with us and enjoying a wee dram as a viewer as well. And it's great to now have you as an active participant. And I have a feeling it might not be the last time that we reach out to you.
Yeah, I say, well, it's we've talked about grain, we've talked about yeast. Say there's a lot more that we haven't fitted in tonight.
And when it comes to grain and to yeast, and I feel we've definitely only been scratching at the surface. Okay, everybody, let's try and get through this quiz as quickly as we can. I'm glad to have Michael hanging around for the quiz with us. Thanks for your time, Michael. As everybody knows, if you've never been for the quiz before, it's optional whether you share the scores. You're only playing against yourself and there's no prizes or anything. Although I tell you what, I am tempted. I have to share this. Would you be okay with me giving a sample? There isn't a lot here. Would you be okay with me pouring a wee sample and sharing it with somebody in the community? Would that be okay?
Yep.
Sure.
I think everything I've sent you is duty paid and legitimate samples.
Okay.
Okay to be shared.
Says duty paid sample on here.
Yeah.
Not for sale. I'm not selling it. I'm just kind of. Can you think of any? Sorry to put you on the spot. Think of a question, Michael. Anything at all that we might have touched upon. And the first barfly to answer will get a wee dram of this. Quite fab. I'm actually reluctant to give it away. But this is the wine yeast combination one that I've been raving about so much. Any question at all, if you can think of one.
I've mentioned the length of fermentation at Loch Lomond, or the fermentation time at Loch Lomond. So if anybody can tell me the length of a standard Loch Lomond fermentation.
Okay, I wasn't paying attention, but I think I've got a reasonable grasp on it. So let's see what comes up in the chats. Eric is saying 4 days, but I think that was the exception.
No, that's the standard.
And Ray Bresniak is saying 70 hours. No.
No, it's 4 days.
So 4 days is standard?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So Eric Evanson nailed it straight out the traps.
Yeah.
Eric, well done. You've won yourself a dram of this. Absolutely fabulous. I'm really enjoying it. Wine combination, 12-year-old, 46% ABV, Loch Lomond. I'll make a note of that because if I don't, I'll forget. My friend over in the States, Eric Evanson, you've got a fantastic sample winging its way towards you right now. And he was quick. He was sharp. 4 days straight away. Okay, everybody, good luck with the quiz tonight. You're only playing against yourself. I'll ask you usually about halfway or perhaps just before I ask you the last question, how your scores are doing, but we'll rattle through it quite quickly. Pass mark is generally 5 out of 10. It's going to be an easy one tonight. I always say that, I know. Okay, Michael, I'll ask you to participate if you feel that you want to, and I'll ask you for your answers and give the chat time to respond as we roll into question one. We've got some questions here from Menno. Menno's multi-mission, and this we start off with one from him as well. Which famous Glasgow whiskey bar shares its name with a long-closed distillery? Is it A, Oranmore, B, Bonaccord, or C, The Gate? Oranmore is in the West End. Bonaccord is just slightly west of the city, just off the motorway. And C, The Gate is a brand new whiskey bar that's opened in the East End of the city. They're all struggling right now, of course. These are crazy times. Yeah. But which of these names recalls a long-closed distillery? Oranmore, Bon Accord, or the Gate? Do you feel confident about this one, Michael?
No. No idea.
No idea. You'll be guessing at this one then. It looked like the crowd are guessing as well. Nobody seems to think it's the Gate. Everybody, they're either guessing Oranmore or Bon Accord. But I can tell you, Michael, what would you guess if you were at a hazard?
Guess B.
Spot on. The Bon Accord. It was a Northeast Highland distillery. Back in the late 19th century, it was actually, at one point in time, the biggest malt distillery in Scotland. Bon Accord. So if you answered B, give yourself a point. So you roll into question 2 and ask, according to Drink International's brand report, what has supplanted Johnny Walker as the most poured Scotch at the world's top 100 bars? So Michael touched on this tonight. This kind of bartenders are looking for something in order to work well in a cocktail. But what's supplanted Johnny Walker for that purpose? Is it Glenfiddich 12, Monkey Shoulder, or Hague Clubman? So A is Glenfiddich 12, a single malt. B is Monkey Shoulder, a blended malt. C is Hague Clubman, which is a single grain. We have 2 from Grants there, Glenfiddich and Monkey Shoulder, and a Diageo product in Hague Clubman. Oh, I thought this would be a giveaway. I thought it'd be a freebie, but there is some of a split. Jimmy Jazz is saying that G's probably C, but he hopes that he's wrong. Mashburn Ross is in, he's saying B. Lord Prefab, that looks like a new name. Welcome in. John Della Cuisine is also saying C. Lots of people seem to think that it could be Hague Clubman. But I can tell you that the one that is supplanted is Michael. What would you guess?
I would say B again.
B, Monkey Shoulder. Absolutely right. Michael's on 2 out of 2. Very successful product to come out of Grants. Fairly inexpensive blended malt, Monkey Shoulder, presented at 40%. Great gateway whiskey for so many people, and a whiskey that's now supplanted Johnny Walker in the top. Only, this isn't a global thing. This is Drink International's brand report, the top 100 bars, cocktail bars, I would imagine. But Monkey Shoulder has become more poured than Johnny Walker for the first time. Question 3, DCL or Diageo. They were known as DCL back in the day, once owned which famous brand before potential monopoly issues forced its sale? This is a Menno question. This is from Menno's multi-mission. So his high score will be artificially inflated tonight. He should perhaps only score himself out of 5 or 6, however many questions are his. But which did Diageo have to sell? Did they have to sell Teachers, Dewar's, or Ballantines to avoid conflicts and monopoly issues? So I'm going back to the 1990s. Two swings and misses for Jimmy Legg. There's plenty of time, Jimmy. There's plenty of time. Keep your eye on. You'll do well. Alistair Gray thinks it's B, Dewar's. It looks like a lot of people think it's Dewar's. Mike Johnson also thinks it's Dewar's. Sillet Bang, P. Dram, a few others, Mashburn and Lindsay Holman. Good to have you in, Lindsay. All think it's C, Ballantines. Michael, what would you guess?
I would have said A.
You think they had to sell Teachers?
Yeah.
The brand that Diageo had to sell in the 90s to avoid monopoly issues was Dewar's, which explains why you'll find things from the Flora and Fauna range from back in the day. I mean, it's hard to find them, but they exist. A Flora and Fauna Aberfeldy and things like that. Dewar's, obviously the most popular blend in the States, Dewar's White Label, but it was once owned by Diageo and they had to sell it. That had just been a wee bit too big. 2 out of 3 for Michael. Which of these are now owned by Loch Lomond Group? I'm hoping you get this one, Michael. Is it A, Rosebank, B, Black Bottle, or C, Little Mill? Surely this is a freebie. Kresimir is Kresimir is angry at Menno for that last question. Perhaps a bit of a banana skin. Yes, the chat is, if you could see the speed of this chat moving now, everybody knows this, Michael. And I don't need to ask you, but go ahead, tell us what it is. The
Be Little
brand
Mill.
went by. Sorry?
Be Little Mill.
Absolutely. Little Mill, as you touched on earlier. Rob C may not be playing, but I'm sipping and learning just as good. Thank you, Rob. I hope you're enjoying it, Rob C. Little Mill. Question 5, always an image question, and I'm just going to ask simply, what distillery are we looking at here? Very interesting that they have 3 pagoda roofs, 3 Doigs ventilators sitting on top. Are we looking at A, Torravik over on Skye, Ardnamurchan in the Western Highlands, or C, Arran, obviously on the Isle of Arran? Which distillery are we looking at here? A, Torravik, B, Ardnamurchan, C, Arran. Everybody complains about the picture questions, but it looks like this is an easy one tonight. Michael, do you think you know this one?
I think I would go for C, Aaron.
Aaron, you think it's Aaron? Rob C's giving me a thumbs up. Jimmy Legacy, and I look at that one a lot in Google Maps. Good for you, Jimmy. But of course, it is Aaron. Interestingly, each one of those roofs is just there for decoration. All those ventilators are there just to kind of hark back to the history and the fact that it is a distillery. It is a bit of that's a lot of kilnage, isn't it? If it was in its original use, they would be a maltings rather than a distillery, right? With all those ventilators on top. But of course, it is Arran. I've yet to get myself over to Arran. I'd love to go over and visit them over there. Question 6. To maintain a steady income, Robert Burns once worked as what? Copywriter and reporter, brewer, or an exciseman? A, copywriter and reporter, B, brewer, or C, exciseman? I can give you a wee bit of a clue that might help you here if you don't know it, and the fact that you're tuning into a vPub whiskey broadcast. So there has to be some form of a whiskey question as opposed to a Burns poetry question. But it looks like, I have to say, it's a bit of an easy quiz tonight. It looks like the whole entire lounge has answered C to this one. Jamie Brown is saying the deal's awa. The deal's awa with exciseman. Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Question C. Did you get that one, Michael?
Yep.
Yep. He was indeed. For a brief period, he was an exciseman, not very long. He was actively courted to work for the Star reporter, as a reporter for the Star in London newspaper, but he turned them down. Big scores tonight, lots of 4s, 5s, and 6 out of 6 so far. Great scores. Whiskey Whistle is saying that is cool. Question 7. Which Loch Lomond Group brand saw extensive placement in the children's comic series Tintin? Which brand from Loch Lomond Group saw lots of product placement? Was it Loch Lomond Whiskey? Was it Glen Scotia Malt Whiskey? Or was it Little Mill Old Highland Whiskey? What did we see a lot mentioned in the Tintin comics? Now, what's super interesting about this, and I won't say too much, I won't give it away. We're going back to, let's say pre-70s. We're going back to the 60s, I think, on this, which is very interesting. Regional Roddy is saying B. Good to have you in. That looks like a new name. Derek K is in saying A. A few new names popping in tonight. Wonderful. Dogs Have No Uncles. Great name, great handle. Thinks it's A. Bill Monteith is here. Good to have you, Bill. Gino is in as well. Desi is here. Whiskey Loving Pianist thinks A. Russell Whiskey thinks C. I can tell you that Tintin often referenced Michael.
A. Captain Haddock's favourite.
Absolutely, Captain Haddock. Now, what's really interesting about this is that Captain Haddock, a bit like The Simpsons predicts the future, Tintin and Captain Haddock were able to predict the future because they were using Loch Lomond as a brand of whiskey before Loch Lomond whiskey actually existed. I think in the late 60s, you guys came along, early 70s.
Yes, I don't know if Tintin was written in the 20s or as far back as that.
Is it as old as that?
But definitely it was written before the distillery was built.
Fascinating. And nobody from there has ever come over to you to talk about your branding, no?
No, say it's well, two things about it. It's a children's story, and I think Captain Haddock is a reliance on alcohol, so it's something we really need to stay clear of.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have to say, even when I was a kid, I loved Captain Haddock as a character. I liked him. I thought he was funny. But when you look at it now, it's bizarre. And an interesting tidbit is that before it was Loch Lomond, it used to be Johnny Walker that they put in the comics until Johnny Walker stopped them doing it. And then they invented this Loch Lomond brand. So you can actually see original comics from original print comics would have mentioned Johnny Walker. Very interesting. Fascinating. Question 8. In 1919, what act saw the enforcement of prohibition in the USA? The key here is the enforcement of prohibition. Which act in 1919? What is it called? Is it A, the Andrews Act, B, the Volstead Act, or C, the Williams Act? And we're talking, this is a Menno question, Menno's multi-mission. So if you're frustrated by this, take out your annoyance at Menno as opposed to me for a change. Is it A, the Andrews Act, B, the Volstead Act, or C, the Williams Act? I kind of knew this, but only because I'd heard it or read it, or it wasn't really something I was super conscious of, but I gave it a guess and got it right. Michael, you?
There's one name that looks familiar to me. It's the Volstead Act.
The Lounge very much think the same, and you're absolutely right. The Volstead Act, 1919. The enforcement of prohibition was carried out under the Volstead Act. Multi-Mission is saying, I regret nothing. Good for you. Jay Francis is saying he heard the name. And then Jimmy Legg is saying this better not be a weasel question. Don't worry, Jimmy. Question 9, Royal Brackla. Sources its water from where? This is another Menno question. Where does Royal Brackla get its water from? Now, I guessed this. I got it right. But, yeah, I didn't know for sure. Was it Codder Burn and the Cursack Springs? Was it the Darrach Burn and the Codder Springs? Or was it the Graham Burn and the Roderick Springs? So what we're talking about there is we're talking about production water from the burn and mash water from the springs. You're looking like you're having to guess at this one, Michael.
Yes, I'm not too hot on other distilleries and
the water source especially. Absolutely, neither am I. Mashburn is saying that this is an asshat question. I absolutely think it is. I think it's a good one all the same, Ross. Royal Brackla, Codder Burn, Cursack Springs, Darrach Burn, Codder Springs, or the Graham Burn and Roderick Springs. I'll give you a wee clue. Question C is a bit of a red herring, and it's a bit of a nod to our friend Roddy Graham, who is one of the founding members of the Royal Brackla Appreciation Society, of which we believe there are only 3 or perhaps 4 members, closed club. So it's either A or B, and I can tell you, do you want to guess, Michael?
I would have said A.
Oh no, what's happened? I think I've just given away question 10. A would be absolutely right. I don't know what flashed up on screen there, but due to a sticking key on my wife's computer, I just scrolled forward. So I might have, this might be the quiz that gives loads and loads of people 10 out of 10. How are we doing tonight? Whiskey Jason is on 9 out of 9 already. Fantastic. Steve A spotted it and a freebie for 10. Damn. Lindsay Holman is saying left B as there was been too many B's and I didn't like the sound of C. Seems reasonable. There is never a pattern to the A's or the B's.
So went for A.
Sorry?
Too many B's, so I went for A.
Is that the same with you? You think that I'm more scheming than I actually am. Precarious Dave's on 7 out of 9. Erwin is saying he's on 10 out of 10 because he's already seen question 10. Good for you. Whiskey 11 Pianist is saying my best whiskey score ever. And question 10 that I've already spoiled. I need to do something about this. I don't know if it's me or the software. Which distillery was built in 1898 by the Dewars to make malt for Dewars White Label I was going to just ask you Milton Duff, Aberfeldy, or Royal Brackla. And the question was, I was leaving the trickiest till the end and I gave it away. What would you have guessed, Michael?
B.
B, of course. It is indeed, of course. Aberfeldy was built specifically for the purpose of stock for Dewar's White Label. Jimmy Jazz is saying B, 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 B. Absolutely. So let's see how many people manage that 10 out of 10 tonight. There's got to be a couple of you. And what's the privilege of earning 10 out of 10? You're very welcome to send me. Scott Clark at 10 out of 9. Very excellent, Scott. Well done. Ray has got 9 out of 9, so probably, Ray, you're on a 10 out of 10 as well. Orange Rule Rule got 10 out of 10. He's laughing. 9 out of 10 from Mike Johnson. 10 out of 10 from Lassie Hjort Oatsman. Good to have you in again, my friend. Alistair Gray, 10 out of 10. Well done, Alistair, and thanks for helping out tonight as well. Thanks for helping out to Steve A, to Whiskey Jason, to Macallan Fine and Rare, to all my fantastic moderators. And if you do score 10 out of 10, you are welcome to contribute quiz questions. I don't guarantee that I can use them, but I may use them as inspiration. I might use them to inspire some other questions. Fantastic stuff. So, Michael, what's your final score? Got you done pretty well. Only one wrong, I think.
Yeah, got 9 out of 10. So,
yeah.
Quite surprised with that. I think I usually fault the first turtle with the ones I've seen before.
There's usually, most of the questions are usually put together because I find them curious or interesting, or there's something interesting behind them. Stefan Novak is saying he did no clue, question 10. Thanks, Roy. You're welcome, Stefan, and thank you very much for your recent contributions and support as well. Good to have you on board. Skogsmard is saying, fell flat on questions 1 and 3. Unlucky for you, Skogsmard, but come on, 8 out of 10 is a great, great score. Wonderful stuff. Erwin is celebrating and laughing at his 10 out of 10. Dylan Thomas is in. Good to see you, Dylan. He's saying greetings from Canada. Thank you to everybody. See, before I go, can I just raise a glass? I forgot to do it earlier tonight, 8 o'clock. Everybody in the street walked out and had a big round of applause for everybody that was working on the front line. I'll kind of, obviously the focus here is on healthcare workers and things, but I'm obviously very mindful of so many people that are working and keeping functions running. And I want to mention you as well, Michael, as well, because currently you're overseeing production of high-strength alcohol for hand sanitizer at Loch Lomond right now, yes?
Yes, we've closed our malt distilleries at Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond, so we're not producing on the malt front. But we've kept our grain distillery running in Alexandria. So just with the demand for hand sanitizer, neutral alcohol is impossible to get.
Yes.
We're distilling new make grain spirit at 94% and supplying that to hand sanitizer companies. Fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic. So that's exactly my point. Michael is going into work every day, and that's what they're doing right now. They're producing neutral grain alcohol spirit for hand sanitizer. So everybody that's involved in going to work when they would probably perhaps enjoy a couple of days sitting at home and self-isolating, I'll raise a glass to everybody and say you're very much appreciated, and thank you all so very, very much. Tim McDonough Pass, so I'm always mindful of that. I'm always mindful of John Marshall, Whiskey Apocalypse, a porter as well in a local hospital. All these people that's going out and working during these really, really tricky times. I've really enjoyed myself, Michael, tonight. I've enjoyed you hanging out with us. I've enjoyed your insight. Like I say, it would be tough for me to stay off the topic of whiskey if we were ever hanging out in real life. But it's fascinating to me. I know that it's been fascinating to the barflies as well. Still so many of them in, 175 in even 2 odd hours into the stream and well beyond midnight as well. And Europe is past 1 a.m. in the morning. I hope you've found it to be interesting, everyone. Michael, I hope you've enjoyed yourself as well. I'll be back on Sunday evening. There'll be no guest. It'll just be me running solo, and there'll be no kind of structure or topic. It'll just be for a relaxed hangout on Sunday evening for some extended opening. I'll see you then. And of course, I fully intend to bring you another vPub a week from tonight that will have a topic and a theme attached to it. I can't keep my nose out of this Wine
I've
yeast.
poured another one.
It's a beautiful, beautiful dram. I'm looking forward to this being available to everybody. Eric, you're going to love this when I send it across to you, my friend. I'll raise a glass to my friend Michael. Thank you for being such a gentleman and so insightful.
For having me in tonight.
You've enjoyed it, yes?
Yes, it's been a great evening. I love chatting about whiskey and sort of, especially that kind of laid back, just informal atmosphere. It's been good just to chat away about things that are kind of just sit in my head all day and get them out there. So.
And the wife probably doesn't want to hear about it too much, right?
She'll switch off about 5 seconds in, so you're stuck with me for 2 hours more than she ever would.
Brilliant. Well, there's been mutual benefit to it as well, which is even better. Congratulations on everything that you've been doing recently. We all appreciate it as whiskey drinkers, whiskey appreciators, let's say. Michael, it's been a pleasure to have you tonight. Everybody that's joined me tonight, thank you so much. Thank you to all who's picked this up in the replay, and I'll see you very, very soon. Meantime, Slancha everyone. Slancha.
Cheers.